You're listening to the Sanditon Chronicles, where we talk all things Sanditon and Sanditon adjacent. Come along with us as we dissect all of your favorite characters, scenes, and dialogue. We have so much to tell you.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Sanditon Chronicles. It's Maureen.
I'm Janice.
And we are back with another episode for you. We are comparing the 1995 version to the 2005 version of Pride and Prejudice. So why are there things that you prefer in the 2005 version over the 1995 version?
Yes, there are. Well, for one thing, I think, the fact that they have winnowed away the unimportant stuff, or largely unimportant stuff, or depicted it differently more quickly. I think that keeps the film moving at a better rate, a better pace. I really like that. I think there's much more passion between the characters, in a synopsis, and I think the writing's tighter. They're not trying to follow the book word for word, scene by scene. They're just trying to get the message across. I think the story's a little easier to follow if you haven't read the book, and sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes if you haven't read the book, then it's hard to follow the film.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the case with this version at all.
No. And I think I like the appearance of the 1995 version a little bit better. I feel like the 2005 version is way too rugged, we are farmers, we have no tenants, because it makes, in the 2005 version, it kind of makes him seem like he is a farmer. He's not a gentleman with land who has farmers working the land. It doesn't make him look like a landowner, it makes him look like a farmer.
He's much more hands-on in that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
landowners were farmers. They had to take care of their land. But what made you a gentleman, what made you that status is that you owned land that other people were tenants of, right? So I think that the 1995 version portrayed that lifestyle a little bit better in terms of how the characters looked, how they dressed. I feel like the 1995 version was a little more true to that time period. Of course, I didn't grow up in that time period, so I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. So I like that aspect of the 1995 version a little better. But I think the 2005 version has the emotion that Jane Austen wrote with displayed fully on screen. It wasn't because she had to write the emotion. So I think that the 2005 version did a better job of depicting that emotion that Jane Austen wrote with, because you can't read her works and tell me she didn't feel passionately about things.
Right. I agree.
You can't look at a history of her life and tell me she didn't feel passionate about things.
Well, anything she wrote that she didn't feel passionate. And I think that the 2005 version is more readily available emotionally to the modern people. Yes.
And though I do like that the 1995 version has all the characters that were in the book, like Louisa and her husband, they weren't necessary on screen.
No.
And that was one thing that they could cut corners on, is take these characters out. Because this amazing work that Jane Austen did, you almost would hate to cut anything out because it's perfect. This piece of work is perfect. But when you translate from book to screen, you have to eliminate some things.
Right.
And a lot of times it goes to characters that maybe aren't as necessary to get to the end result. And they realize that in the 2005 version. The other thing I like about the 2005 version is, like we talked about if you watched our episode last week on the 1995, you said that I felt that there didn't need to be as many scenes of Elizabeth walking alone down the countryside. I don't think that needed to be that many of them. However, how they did nonverbal in the 2005, I really appreciated, because it wasn't just watching her walk across the field. It was the hands that you could almost physically feel the electricity coming off of, the way they honed in on it, the way they had them react with their hands in all their silent moments in 2005. There was something to visualize, something to get out of it. I think in the 1995 version, when there was silence, it wasn't as easy to grab things from those scenes.
Right. And, because they were trying, 95 was trying so hard to stay so true to Jane Austen's books. Well, she couldn't, she had to write out what was happening between them. You couldn't just visually depict it in the book. And I do appreciate, as I said in that, when we were going through that episode in 95, I really appreciate the looks between Darcy and Elizabeth when she's helping Georgiana at the piano, and there's that rude conversation from Bingley's sisters, and he can't get a word in edgewise to interrupt them. But in the 2005 version, you have a lot more of these interactive shots of how they look at each other, even when and Darcy, when he comes into the first ball and he glances at Elizabeth, I mean, you see that, but there's no conversation about it. And, obviously she overhears his comment, which was not meant for anybody else, but to which she took great offense. And you see that in the conversation between her and Charlotte, but they're all in a very narrow screenshot, and it's handled very quickly. So the pace of the 2005 is much better in my mind. You can't stop watching it at any point because something important is going to happen. Whereas the 95, it's like, I like, even though the character of Mrs. Bennet drives me crazy, it's much worse than 95 because we see so much more of it.
Yep.
And whereas it's a little more controlled. I mean, the actress who plays Mrs. Bennet in the 2005 version, it's much more under control. You get the feeling of her silliness without it being so exaggerated, so over the top.
And then you get that loving component to the 2005 Mrs. Bennet, and you don't get the loving one from the 1985.
No, she's just silly.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's just tolerating her.
And the other thing I like too is, and you pointed this out in the 1995 discussion that we had, that they hone in a lot on Colin or Darcy staring at Elizabeth. But, and again, I have to believe this is how Colin Firth is scripted, that the way this character was scripted for him, he does look angry. And I know that that's kind of how Jane Austen describes him in the book, that's what Elizabeth thought. He was just looking to find fault. He was angry at her every time he looked at her. That's what she thought. I think that the 2005 interpreted that a little bit better, because he didn't look happy when he stared at her. He looked almost like he was trying to figure something out, which quizzical brow.
Right. Who is she? What is she?
Yes. Why does she pull it? It depicts more of, why am I getting pulled into this? Like, he's mad at himself. He's not angry at her, but it leaves enough room for Elizabeth to be mad at him. In the 1995 version, I feel like it's more like he just looks angry all the time.
Well, he looks creepy. He looks like he's stalking her. And in the 2005 one, it's like stolen glances.
Mm-hmm. And right with the quick pacing, you see that in the church when he goes to Rosings Park. Right. Fitzwilliam is telling Keira Knightley's Elizabeth Bennet about Charles Bingley and Darcy and Jane, and she happens to glance at him, and it's the music in this too. The score, I think, is really well done in the 2005 version.
Yeah.
I actually can't recall too much music in the 1995 version other than the intro and outro and when there's a dance.
And the walls, yeah.
I don't recall a whole lot of, and if it's there, it wasn't memorable to me, so I don't remember it. But in this one, they used the music to, and I think that's what made maybe that's why it seemed more passionate, because they used the music to really communicate an emotion. And that scene in the church where she looks at Darcy, you can hear the music softly playing in the background, then it amps up right as he pops his eyes up and looks at her, and she looks away startled. It's that quick pace. It's that we only need a snippet of this. We don't need to dwell in this space here. We just need to know it's happening.
And they did things like, we didn't see in the 2005 version, we don't see the wedding of Lydia and Wickham and Darcy standing up with Wickham. We don't see that. Which did we need to? We get told about it in the letter. We know that it happened. I don't need to see it. And I think that was a conclusion that the writer of the 2005 version came to, that it wasn't really necessary to show that.
It was the same with the Gardner children. When Lizzie went to the Peaks district with her aunt and uncle, they didn't talk about all the kids that they had. They didn't have scenes with Jane playing with the kids at the home because it wasn't it's nice. It was in the books or the book, but it's not needed on screen.
Right.
In the book, you have to have more so you can show a character more, but on a screen you can see the character, so you don't need to be told it so much.
Right. Yeah, it's just one of the differences between books and film.
Mhm.
And I remember, as I probably have spoken about this before, but when I saw Gone with the Wind, and it was 4 hours long, and the book was so long, and they cut out, entire marriages in order to get it down to four
Really?
hours. Oh yeah, you've never read or have you seen either of them?
I've never read the book. Hated the movie with a passion.
Well, I think you should rewatch it now.
Nope, I hate it.
How many years ago did you watch it?
When I was pregnant with my second daughter.
So
she just turned 10.
Oh yeah. Well, read the book.
I'll try that.
The book is amazing in terms of historical context and everything.
Okay. It was Scarlett's character that I hated so much that ruined it for me. And the ending. I hated the ending. I was so mad that I sat through 4 hours of that to get to that conclusion. I was angry. But I get that. I think that Jane Austen has such a reputation, and she's so beloved that it's almost like you feel bad cutting things out of her book to make it to screen. But I think these are things that even Jane Austen would see the pragmatism of this doesn't need to be on there. If you do this you don't need to write this whole scene in there. If you do it this way, you can cut this part out. I think Jane Austen would be okay with it because I think she understood what good storytelling was. There is good storytelling in movies, there's good storytelling in books, but it differs on how it has to be told.
Right.
And I think that maybe they were a little squeamish or maybe a little nervous to cut that out, which is crazy because Sense and Sensibility came out the same year and it was only a 2.5 hour long movie.
Right.
And it was it Andrew Davies? I don't know if that was Andrew Davies. Was not.
Yeah, not that one. Not that version.
So maybe that's why. Maybe it was Andrew Davies who wanted to stick so close to Jane Austen that nothing was lost.
Yeah, maybe.
Which is honorable.
But yeah, as the saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Yes, exactly.
And so you don't, and when you're showing it, when you have the film, you don't have to then depict every single word in order to get the message across. And that's real clear in the 2005 version. Mm-hmm. It's actually a great study between these two versions, to look at the two versions and do that compare and contrast.
Yeah.
The dogs weren't in the 2005 version, so that's one reason to like
there was one.
There was, but not the same dogs.
No.
Yeah, there was a dog, but and that we didn't see the scene in the 2005 version. We didn't see Darcy even go and find Lydia and Wickham. We just heard about it all. In the letter. We didn't have to.
Well, we heard from Lydia.
Right. We heard from Lydia. But you don't understand what I mean. It was, and instead of the scene so the way they got her to reveal the truth about Darcy was at the dinner at Longbourn.
Yep.
It wasn't walking the four sisters walking together and Wickham running around in his horse like a maniac. That was a stupid scene, if you ask me.
And the way he smiled at them when he was doing it was just like, ooh.
He's showing off. And gross. The man is creepy.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I think the Wickham in 2005 is more like I imagined him in terms of he can be very wonderful and outgoing and friendly, but he lets his mask down every once in a while in that one, and he barely does in the 95 version.
He's very sinister.
Yeah, and the way that he had to give in and agree to this because of the money, even though he didn't really want to, and you get that just in the way that Wickham pulls Lydia to sit down in the carriage.
I love that scene.
Yeah.
And what I think is interesting is in the 1995 version, they draw out how awful Wickham is. They draw it out. They show you piece by piece by piece how awful he is and everything he's done. And we see that after they're married, and it's the scene that we talked about last week where Wickham is in the garden with Elizabeth. And he has no reason to still try to pit her against Darcy. He has no reason to, but he's still trying to. He still wants her to be like, oh, poor Wickham. And part of me is, you have to wonder as a watcher, is that because he wants to have an opportunity with her still, even though he's married to her sister? Like, what that, so that's the point where you see is nefarious. In the 2005 version, it didn't have to be drawn out. You just see it in those moments, like when he yanks Lydia down, like when he gives Mr. Bennet the look, when Kitty says, can I go to Newcastle? And he says, out of the question. The look on Wickham's face when he says that. That's how you see how sinister he is. We didn't need the long drawn out scene after scene after scene after scene to see that or to understand it.
It's quickly portrayed in the 2005. Well, the other one of the differences is I like Mr. Bennet in both productions. I really like him in 2005. I mean, and he's just there's the difference you were describing. You think that for the 95 is really more realistic, that they have more money than than you would think. I mean, you would think that of a gentleman, but you get the feeling that they don't have any extra money for sure in the I don't know why I have trouble saying that, but the 2005 version. And I love just the way that he portrayed Mr. Bennet, and it was so clear how much he loved Elizabeth and Jane, but especially Elizabeth, and the way he delivered his lines. And I just really like that portrayal better.
I think that Mr. Bennet fits more with the silly Mrs. Bennet.
Yeah,
because the portrayal that Donald Sutherland did was more of nothing actually matters. Nothing needs to be taken seriously. And that's just given off of his appearance, by how he takes care of himself, by how he presents himself to society, by even in the drawing room of that first ball, when Lydia comes up and says, you'll never guess what I have to tell you. He says, you're going to take the veil. Nothing is serious to him. So that Mr. Bennet makes more sense with Mrs. Bennet, any version of Mrs. Bennet. Right. But in the 1995 version, he's not played so loose. He's played as everything's a joke, but he takes things seriously. So him with Mrs. Bennet doesn't line up very well. I think the interpretation was a little off because they feel very mismatched. I think that was one of our complaints about it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah, and so that's another reason. I also think that Lady Catherine is better portrayed by
Dame Judi Dench.
Yeah, Judi Dench. Yeah, she's a pretty
amazing.
How
can you go wrong with her?
Yeah, she does an amazing job. Even in the scenes when they've gone to her house and she's hosting, it's just not such a bizarre character. She's aristocratic and wants to get her way, but it's not so just creepy. Weird how it happens.
She's way more regal in the 2005 version. In the 1995 version, she just seems like an eccentric rich lady. But in the 2005, you get that she is the way she is because she believes she is of a higher plane. She is of a higher status than everybody. She is owed deference because she is verging on royalty. So you get that more in this version.
But she doesn't have to talk about it as much.
Nope. I mean, clearly she talks to Collins about it a lot, but
but given how the way he is, it's he probably talks about it. She doesn't probably have to say anything. Yeah, and I can see Darcy being related to Lady Catherine in the 2005 version. Him being related to her in the 95 version is just totally, I just can't even see it. How could he look down on the Bennets when he had an aunt like that in the 95 version? It's reconcilable to me in the 2005 version.
Well, how so?
Because, like you said, the Lady Catherine is regal and, a better looking woman, for one thing, that matches Darcy more so. You could see that they could be related. I can't see Colin Firth being related to the woman who played Lady Catherine in the 95 version. I can't see it at all.
That's a good point. That's a fair point. And I think that's one of the prejudices in the book, is that he has this eccentric relative who's rude and obnoxious and isn't kind and isn't, I mean, for all the display and pomp and circumstance she puts on, she does not operate the way respectable society operates. She's very vocal about her money, her things, what she wants, what she expects. And that's what Mrs. Bennet does, only Mrs. Bennet doesn't have the money to back it up.
Right.
But then there's also the idea of trade. And that's one thing that I think they did handle a little bit better in the 1995 version. They showed and talked more about how the Gardners were from Cheapside, how they were in trade, how they came from that. So it made more sense why Louisa and Carol, in the 2005 version, why Caroline would have come at her for that, or come at them for that, because they have a Cheapside London or Cheapside family members. I think the 95 version highlighted that a little bit better than 2005 did, because a lot of people don't catch that Gracechurch Street is in Cheapside in London. They are from trade. It's why they live in Cheapside. They have a warehouse that they sell things out of. And the irony there, of course, is that that's where the Bingleys made their money.
Right. It's just interesting, the contrast between the two.
I will say, go ahead.
All I was going to say is the Lady Catherine scene when she goes to see Elizabeth in the 2005 version. I like that better because she really caught them off guard. The timing seems more appropriate. She goes at night and, wakes up the household because she's the timeliness. She's concerned right now.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas in the 95 version, she comes in the middle of the day. It's rude, but it's not that sense of urgency.
Yeah. And Jane Austen did write it the way it is in the 1995 version. But again, sure, the difference there is that we have to see the urgency rather than be told it. And the 1995 version did what the book does, is tell us the urgency. But the 2005 version showed that there was an urgency behind it.
Right,
Of course, the passion that I keep on to call her Lady Denham, that Lady Catherine displays in the 2005 version. Obviously, that's our biggest thing about the difference between the two, is the passion.
Right.
That speech that she gives Elizabeth, like, I'm on the edge of my seat every time I watch it. She's giving that speech in that room in the dark. I will say that something that the 1995 version has over the 2005 is when Darcy actually talks to Elizabeth about her feelings at the end. I hate how the 2005 did that. I hate it. It deserved more than, well, then your hands are cold. It deserved more.
But what you hate about it was her words.
Yes, not his. His was spectacularly perfect.
Yeah, and I'm sure that was what the director told her to do.
Yeah, was, yeah.
But what he has just said is one word from you. So she decides to give no word, basically. I do. I have to say the 95 version, the words are better. The delivery, I don't think is.
Well, I think Elizabeth's delivery is, because even when he goes on, he says, if, however, your feelings have changed, then I must tell you. And he says that then would have been the opportunity to say something of, my feelings are opposite to what they were then, or I do love you, or something.
Right.
That's what she said. Well, that in the 1995 version, as sort of stiff as it's delivered, Jennifer L also depicts this sort of shyness that I think is something that Darcy needs to see, that she loves me enough that she's almost afraid of what my reaction is going to be to it. And I think Jennifer L delivered it well. I think
I would agree with that.
We didn't see the passion that we do from Darcy in 1995 that we do in 2005, I don't think. But we also don't get what we need from Elizabeth, I think, in the 2005 version in that scene.
It's nice to hear the words.
Yes.
For her to say,
and I think he deserved to hear them.
Instead of it just being implied because she didn't say anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't mind that they didn't show the wedding in the 95.
Oh, I don't mind that either.
Yeah, that and because again, they're together and they're passionate. You see their passion together after he's gotten her father's permission. I love that whole scene. They're both good in both versions, but I like it better in the 2005 version.
Yeah, because we see in the 2005, we see Darcy's nervousness. We see him, and that's the Darcy in 2005 is more vulnerable. he is more, passionate, but he's more introverted rather than cruel or arrogant. I know that Jane Austen says that he was given good principles, but taught to use pride with them. So he does have a fair amount of pride. We've discussed that, but he's also very shy and very introverted and vulnerable. And we get to see that play out in the 2005 version. In the 1995 version, her dad just asks, he said, of course I gave my permission, but we don't see any of that. We don't see Darcy go in there and ask his permission or what the response was after.
Right. And we don't see the 2005 version. He is so nervous while she's in there. And we really see that. And we don't see that in the 95 at all.
No.
I mean, it's, I love Matthew Maffei. How did you say his name? Mafadgen. Yeah. I love him in that part. He is so good in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's another one. This is a little aside. Another series that you need to watch and maybe we'll review someday is The Last Kingdom.
I've heard that one's really good too.
It's really good.
Mm-hmm. And I think part of why he plays it so well, and we discussed this, is because he had never read Pride and Prejudice. He had never seen the movie. He got, at least that's what he said, he got everything he got it from this script. Colin Firth knew the story of Pride and Prejudice. He had read the story. He had seen it. So, and the script was basically the book. So there's probably also that desire to stay true to the author's work.
Right. Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think that he was definitely influenced by the book and was trying to follow it. I just think as a film version, the 2005 is better.
Yeah. They interpreted it.
Like if you're studying Jane Austen and you're studying Pride and Prejudice and you want to see what you're reading, then you watch the 95.
Mm-hmm. But if you just love the story,
right,
and you want that, I think the better version is that. And did you notice too that both of them ended the same? They both zoomed in on the screenshot of Darcy and Elizabeth kissing.
Yes.
And 1995 was obviously their wedding. This one was at their house.
But it was as they're they're in the carriage leaving the wedding is when they kiss for the first time we see.
Yep. Well, yeah.
In the 95 version.
It's also the first when they're at Pemberley in the very end of the movie is where we see the 2005 version too.
Right. But there's so much more anticipation. There's so much more when they kiss, you've been like wanting them to kiss for scene after scene. And I just don't get as much of that. There's one scene in the 95 when maybe it must be when he's declaring his love and they're close and then they pull apart. But that's even more so in the 2005 version. They are this close and then back off.
And again, it makes more sense to see that because otherwise it just seems like, wait, how did you fall in love with him?
Right.
You need to see that she has the same, because there's that thing that says, there's a fine line between love and hate.
Right.
She feels something deeply for him. And that was played out in the 2005 version better. In the 1995, she just didn't like him at all. She wasn't enticed by him. She wasn't nothing really.
No, she was totally put off by him, which I would too if he was being so creepy staring at her.
Exactly. Yes. And the other thing too, it's this little thing, but it's in the end of the 2005 movie where they're at Pemberley and he doesn't have any socks on or his breeches aren't tucked in anything. And it's just his bare calf and she's rubbing the back of his calf. And I thought that depicts how intimately connected the two of them are and how deeply she loves him, because that is a very informal, very passionate sort of thing to do at that time. I mean, now we wear skirts to show our legs. It's not a big deal. Guys wear shorts. It's not a big deal. It was a much bigger deal then. And to see her doing something that was so intimate to him said 1,000 words.
Right. Yeah, that's right. It did. So what did you think of the two different Janes?
I feel like, although I love the first actress, I feel like she played the character very one note. And I felt like the Jane Bennett in this movie, instead of the series, I feel like she played more layers to her character, more emotions. But you could tell when she was talking about Bingley that she was still very frazzled. Like when they find out he's coming back to town and they're in the marketplace and she says, "Do not think me in danger, Lizzie." And then she turns around and bumps right into somebody. Like she's just frazzled. So you can
Right.
tell the hold he still has on her. In the 1995 version, and of course, that's how women were supposed to be that back then. They were expected to be that way. They're expected to just move on, find somebody else. But I feel like they could have played this character a little more multi-layered.
Yeah, the fact that from her being heartbroken to then having hope again, and then, you know, she is depicted in the 95 version as very happy about the proposal, which we don't see.
Yeah.
But we
From
do
Darcy
see,
either. We don't see from Darcy either.
but in the 2005 version, yeah, there's so much more of a range of motions. You know, it's the dynamics are much greater.
Yeah. Yeah. And after that first ball, I think the other actress, she does happy well, like in the end of in episode 6, she does happy well. She's giggling, but you see that blossom in Jane Bennett in the 2005 version right after that first ball. And again, it's hard because I know at that time period, it wasn't like, especially in England, it's not like you just were effusing with emotions. It's probably a very American thing to want and to say. But after that first ball, she was very subdued as she talked about him, which is the whole point I get, because Darcy had to assume she doesn't feel the same way about him that he does her. So I get why they played it that way, but you could still get there with showing that emotion between her and her sisters. So I wish the 1995 version, tone it down in public, but with her sister, let her be open.
Right. Yeah.
At least a little.
Yeah. Yes. Give us a clue.
And I did like the Mary in the 2005 version better. I feel like she played off pious. She played off not interested in anything that normal girls are interested in. She did play that role, but she wasn't mean.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Part of it's the time. They had too much time.
Yeah.
The 95 version. And what about Mr. Collins?
I prefer the 2005 version because he makes me laugh. He's the 1995 version. He just makes me feel cringy and like dirty somehow. But the 2005 version, he's so short and he's so like, I don't know. Every time I think of him, I just think of that scene where Darcy turned around and his elbow almost hit him in the face. Like that's the epitome of Collins to me. What about you?
They played that very well. And I like both Charlottes.
Yes.
It'd be a little hard pressed. I do think that in the 2005 version, they show the camaraderie, the fact that Elizabeth and Charlotte are such good friends. They show it more.
Yes.
Than they do in the 95. But
I do feel like the 1995 version captured how astute Charlotte is better than the 2005 version did.
Yes. Yeah.
And she was open about it.
Yeah, that's right. The 2005 version, Elizabeth says she's not very good at the pianoforte. And it's depicted that way. Whereas in the 95, she sits down and plays and sings beautifully. So thou dost protest too much in that version.
Yes, I agree. And I think that, like, especially compared to Georgiana, because Georgiana in the 1995 version was like, don't make me sing. But she's supposed to be this beautiful musician. Yes, she's hyper shy. But Elizabeth played to her level. And if you wanted to show that she wasn't very good, you should have made her play less than the prodigy on the piano.
Right. Well, I love the scene when she just happens on Elizabeth when she's sitting at the piano in Pemberley.
I think it's hard for me to say I don't like any of the characters in either version, really. But there's definitely things that I could separate out that I will choose the 2005 version over and over and over again, especially if for nothing else, it's 2 hours long.
Yeah.
And then it's done. Now, I love being in the Pride and Prejudice world, but 6 hours of sitting still watching TV I can't. That's a lot for me.
Well, especially when it doesn't really make the story further more information. It's just details. It's not, the 2000, I think you get the whole story in the 2005 version.
Yeah. And I think if I didn't know the story, and if I had never read the book, if I'd never seen any of the show, maybe I would like the 1995 version better. But then I wouldn't keep watching it year after year after year because, okay, I got the whole story now. I don't need the whole story continually anymore.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's some things in the 95 version that are helpful in the story.
Absolutely.
You know, it explains more to you. But yeah, I definitely, you know, the thing to do, in my opinion, if we're talking to anyone who has never seen either one, watch the 2005 film, read the book.
Absolutely.
That's what would be best.
Do that. And I know that like I have a lot of friends who, well, not a lot, but I have a few friends who are like, well, I can't read this book. I don't understand it. Maybe then I would suggest that you watch the 1995 version, but the language is fairly similar, if not the exact same. So I don't know that will even help you.
Yeah, if you want to understand the story, watch the 2005.
Yeah.
Because it just happens. So, I mean, sitting through 6 hours, like you said, and okay, you get more detail, but it doesn't really make the story different.
Yeah, it just puts pieces in that you are assuming off camera or that they mention happen.
Right.
As it like we didn't need to see, like we said, we didn't need to see Darcy at the wedding because Lydia said he was at the wedding. He discovered us. That's all we need. He's obviously the reason who's there. We don't need to see him because there's two different times where we see him doing that in reference to their wedding. There's one that's the day of the wedding, and there's another after he finds him, and then there's another when he talks to the gardeners. And I do like that. That's another thing is that when he in the 1995 version, when Mr. Bennet gets a letter from Mr. Gardner, he says, 2 things I want to know. 1, how much your uncle must have paid him, and 2, how will I ever pay him back? And then we see that scene with Mrs. Gardner writes back to Elizabeth, says, this is what happened. And then we also see Darcy talking to the Gardners, going through what happened. So it's like, okay, we're getting it here, and we're getting it here. In the 2005 version, it's, I wonder how much your uncle must have spent on that man. And then Lydia says, Darcy discovered us. He paid for everything. Wickham's commission, everything. Okay, done. That's all we need. So it was, and it's little pieces like that it's not so drawn out in the 2005.
And do we really care about the details of that? The fact that Darcy stepped up to the plate and did this for Elizabeth, saved her family, that's what we care about.
Yeah. And it was for her.
Right. For her and her family and their reputation.
And so, I mean, it sounds like we're ragging on the 1995 version. But I truly love that version. I won't watch it very often because it's too long.
And it's amazing to me that they're only 10 years apart.
Yes.
Because of the way they were made, I would have thought it would have been more like 20 years apart.
Even the colors, right? Like the colors, they're darker in the 2005 version, but somehow they also seem more vibrant. Like it just,
right.
image looks more alive in the 2005.
Sharper.
Yes, that's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Granted, that's not the 1995 version's fault, but
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It is beautiful. The clothes are prettier in the 95 version.
Yep.
I mean, if you're into the clothing of the period, you're probably better off. Of course, I think you're better off watching Sanditon.
Yes.
If you see the clothes of the period. But yeah, because I think they do a marvelous job in it. And even some of the newer versions of like Sense and Sensibility and Emma, if that's what you're after is the depiction of the clothing, I would look at those even more than the 95 version of Pride and Prejudice. I
would agree with that. So anything else that you want to, I think we fairly laid out our case. I think we made a good case actually for why 2005 is better.
Nothing else occurs to me at the moment. I think we covered it.
Again, not that the 1995 is bad. Like I feel like I need to say that 1,000 times because I want to say it for the people in the back, like the 1995 version, we are not saying is bad. We're just saying it's not as good as the 2005 version.
And unfortunately at the moment you can't get the 2005 version on Netflix anymore.
It's gone now.
You can rent it from Amazon, but you do have to pay like $3.75 or whatever.
And plus the 2005 version, I had some friends who had never seen any of the movies. I'm like, okay, I'm going to start you with a 2005 movie. We're going to watch it. We're going to have a Jane Austen night. And we went through, and because I'm an event planner, it's in my head to do it this way, but I wouldn't researched all the food that would be served at that time period, the clothing stuff, the decorations, what kind of things they would have. So we had a Pride and Prejudice night. We made Victorian tea cakes. We made, well, bruschetta is not really that time period, but it felt like it. We made a potato and carrots dish. Like we made a whole bunch of foods and appetizers, like we were having a high tea. And we made milk tart, which is so good. And we could do that because it was just 2 hours of our life, and we could have a half hour of fellowship in the beginning, a half hour fellowship at the end, and you're done. Right. You can't do that. You can't gather people around you to have a Pride and Prejudice night with one viewing for the other version. And you could make a month of it, but
yeah, definitely.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
So let us know what you think. Which one is your favorite in the comments? I know a lot of you are partial to 1995, and that is totally fine. But let us know. We want to know why. Don't just come on there and say 1995 is better. Tell us why it's better. Tell us who's your favorite Mr. Darcy, who's your favorite character.
And the bottom line for me is, does it make me really feel for the characters? And I feel it a lot more in 2005.
Agreed. Yep. Agreed. So we have one more episode coming up for you this season for us at the Sanditon Chronicles, and it will be holiday fan fiction of Sanditon. Now, Janice and I have started to go through and grab some out. If you have one you want us to review for you, you're going to have to get them to us by Monday, which would be tomorrow. Hopefully I'm getting this out on Sunday. I'm not sure. And then we'll be gone for a month, maybe a month and a half, depending on New Year's, stuff like that. But we'll be coming back with a brand new revamped schedule for you that we will let you know when it happens. So on that note, we'll see you real soon. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Are you craving more TSC content? Head on over to our social media accounts. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and our Facebook group, the Sanditon Chronicles Sanditon Family Fan Club. Also, check out our website, thesanditonchronicles.com. Of course, we want to hear from you. We want to know what you want to hear and what your thoughts are. Email us at the.sanditonchronicles@gmail.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tune in every week for new episodes.